I'm assuming, that are familiar with what we have done in the past 1 year or so. For those of you who are not, I'll quickly trace the journey. So before 2023, Atul was heading delegations to different geographies. Dubai, of course, JISEC, Singapore, and these efforts were kind of intermittent for us. They were not like happening in a sustained fashion, right? But in 2023, the GTD team officially got set up at DSI, which is looking at both aspects. One is the trade aspect of it. That's why the name global trade. But at the same time, we are engaging with the embassies. We are engaging with strategic international stakeholders. Hence, the word diplomacy also got added to the team, right? So this is one important point that I need you to remember. Second is, I'll quickly talk about in the 2023 what we have done, right? So in 2023 April, we took a delegation to JISEC Dubai, right? Of course, the importance of Middle East as a geography for the Indian companies, which are looking to expand, which are looking to, acquire clients there, was definitely one of the key drivers. And given that in JISEC we had taken delegations in 2019 as well. I think 2 delegations before 2023. So this was our third delegation to JISEC, and it wasn't just a delegation. We had set up a full-fledged Indian pavilion, right? Because if there is an official presence of Indian companies there, and that too in large numbers, that definitely sends out a very strong message, right? It's as simple as that. So 2023 JISEC happened. 22 companies from India, both products and services mix, they went under the DSCI banner and they showcased. They had reasonably good success, I would say, in April, right? After that came US. US was a slightly different nature in terms of how we conducted it. We spent almost 2.5 weeks there, right? We took part in RSA, not of course in the official capacity, because at the end of the day we have to be cognizant of the constraints. It's not that everything that we think of would be executed, right? It might be on the roadmap, but it may not be executed immediately, right? Hence this session as to how we can make things happen which aren't happening, right? So in US, we spent at RSA, we did what we call as the Indo-US Cybersecurity Exchange, right? And this, a similar exercise we did in Dubai as well, where we did a Indo-UAE Cybersecurity Exchange, right? So some of you are familiar with what we have done, but I'm just reiterating, right? And as part of this, one is when we are setting up formal Indian pavilions, we get to interact with the customers there for sure. But when we are setting up dedicated engagements with CXOs, with CIOs, in fact, Dubai was, the Indo-UAE exchange was all about CIOs, right? So we are trying to expand in terms of, reaching out to the senior leadership there. Because senior leadership, one is definitely that they are the decision makers, but at the same time, tapping into the Indian diaspora. So yesterday we were doing something called as Indian Diaspora Meet, right? So the Indian diaspora has been a huge help and will continue to be a big help to all of us as a collective unit, right? So US we did at RSA, we did Indo-US exchange, and then we went on to other geographies, DC, New Jersey, New York. In New Jersey, New York, we reiterated what we did in SF, smaller scale of course, but it was a powerful cohort that we were able to form. In DC, of course, it was primarily oriented to policymakers, regulatory, because that's where the ecosystem resides, right? So this is what we did. Recently, some of you were there with us at Black Hat as well, right? We set up a good Indian pavilion with 13 companies, because in 2023 Black Hat, it was a very humble presence. 7 companies we took, but those were like individual pods that were set up, no formal Indian pavilion. This time it was a full-fledged Indian pavilion. Those of you who have seen it would be appreciating the prominence that we bring when we are finding the location for the booth, when we are getting into all those negotiations. So the idea is also to let you know what all GTD team of DSCI does. So this is all the groundwork that goes into making this happen, right? So Saudi happened, and Saudi was also, although I'm yet to catch up with a lot of folks, but Saudi was also reasonably successful endeavor for us, right? So this is what we have primarily done in 2023. Apart from it, of course, whenever, as I mentioned, whenever we reach out to the geographies, for example, in Saudi, the Indian ambassador hosted the delegation, right? It was like a very specific, and he of course inaugurated our pavilion at Black Hat, which in itself is a very, very strong message, right? So leveraging the diplomatic connections, bringing all those Indian diaspora, and then of course taking care of the trade part at the same time. So these are broadly if you will, 2-3 prongs that we take when we are planning for different geographies. Now, coming to why we are meeting today, right? Because a lot of you are here at AISS, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to brainstorm with you that how 2024 is going to look like for the global trade function of DSCI, right? So whether it's in terms of the geographies that remain untapped, whether it's the ASEAN, the Middle East, US, of course, does EU make sense to some of you or to all of you? So all these aspects as to which geographies we should be targeting, how should our plan look like for 2024? Because we can't be doing this planning in isolation unless we have those credible inputs from you. As simple. So if we have those concerted inputs from you, we would be able to do it much better. And that's the intent, to give you, have this free-wheeling conversation in terms of what are 3-4 points. What are the geographies we should be focusing on? What are the stakeholders or what are the key events and platforms internationally we should be looking if we aren't currently looking at it? Because trust me, although we did only 3 large engagements in 3 years, we have been exploring so many other geographies, Indonesia, Singapore, and so many others, right? So what are the key events and platforms we should be doing? And most importantly, what are the constraints? Because it's not that every time DSCI can take the effort of, because we make significant investments into this. You all also support, but at the end of the day, we have to optimize as to where we are going, where we are not going, and how to take that call, basis what decision. So we would want to listen from each one of you as to what are those priorities and what are your constraints, right? So this is what I would like to hear from each one of you during the session. But before that, Atul, if you could add to the context.
So good afternoon, everyone. Actually, another parallel session has to start from my end, so I'll take your excuse for 15 minutes, and again I'll come back. Meanwhile, Aditya and Pragya, I think both of them are engaging with you guys from last couple of years, so they will be interacting with you, noting down and exchanging the notes. So, a couple of things that I'll say. Majority of things Aditya has talked about, you guys already know it. See, one is the trade part, which is taking the delegations, receiving delegations. Many places where you see it, but apart from that, the diplomatic angle, and what we try to do, we try to mix the diplomacy and trade together. Because on one side, if we just take delegations, we are not elevating brand India. Diplomatic angles, we have to pull that string somehow. If we bring all of those channels as well, because they are the key decision makers, especially to elevate brand India. When I say brand India, like we have heard about Israel, right? When you talk about cybersecurity, first thing, acha product hoga. Like this is kind of a perception majority of the people, CISOs and all have, right? This is something that we want to do for Indian ecosystem. Up to a certain extent, with the support from all of you, we have elevated it. Long back, again, with some of you, I have shared that experience when I took delegations way back in 2017 and all. That was like first time we have taken a delegation outside India. The experience was, if I remember correctly, there were 13 companies. The point is, India में 11 companies हैं. That's the perception. That time we 150 companies थे, right? Then we took a small delegations to say Bahrain and all those geographies. जहाँ पे it was a very small delegations we had. So question is always, you have 4 companies in India, you have 10 companies in India. That's the perception, because people are saying from services side we are huge, but from product side we are not that huge. Even in services, IT services we are great. But in cyber services, do we have companies? People were not that aware of. 1 or 2 companies kind of. But the brand India was not present. So this is the major intent that we have. And we are engaging with the counterparts. Now coming back to that point, diplomacy and trade. DSCI, by virtue of being DSCI, we are engaged in various diplomatic discussions. Whether it's BRICS and BIMSTEC kind of thing, or say G20 or Quad, or it could be SCO kind of thing, Shanghai Cooperation, where China, Russia, Pakistan, all of those countries are also sitting. So we are engaged in all of those discussions. Most of the things you will not see in public domain because being the sensitive nature of those things. But we are dealing on those things. So this kind of work that we are doing, we want to bring it to this side, the trade, so that we can enable that perspective for you all, so that we can leverage it. One angle that Aditya talked about is engagement with the embassy. Wherever we are going, we are making sure we are meeting embassies. Not necessarily they are inviting and hosting us first time, but at least they are getting the sense. Like last year when we have taken delegation to Saudi, we met ambassador. This time they have hosted us. Even he came for the inaugural and all those things happened. Idea is if we elevate it, once he hear that, once that person see it happening in India, they'll start talking about it. They'll also have the confidence. So that's how we are trying to do. And this is how the team is trying to expand the things. Again, one piece, broadly if I talk about, one is like prominent geographies, US, Middle East, some countries in ASEAN, European markets, some of the countries. But there are many countries like, say, Australia, New Zealand, right? Japan for that matter. People who are raising investment, they might be looking at Japan as well, right? We were talking about, for example, African market. That's also very prominent. We might not have done it so far, but we are interested to do it. First, we want, and again, the bandwidth is a challenge here. We have few people working on that. We want to understand from you guys, these are our priorities. This is what our charter should be. Accordingly, we'll plan it. 24, like almost it's gone. So 25 when we are entering, what should be our charter? So we want to hear from you guys, these are our priority list, this is what we want. This is one portion. Again, the high level thing. Specifically, many of you have participated in those delegations. What specifically you want us to do more? कुछ किया है, but further, how can we improve it? Any idea, irrespective whether it's implementable, not implementable, tricky hoga, costly hoga, irrespective of anything, if you can share that, we'll probably try to find out the solution. Probably will come back to you only, like how can we execute that? But the idea is in next, say 30-35 minutes, if we can identify those elements, what we need to do, how can we improve it? And at the end of the day, say next, say 1 year down the line, how can we further increase the brand India positioning? Upfront, if I say our team is working on a couple of delegations. One, we are looking at the ASEAN market, very important from Indian diplomacy perspective, and a couple of you guys are already working in ASEAN. So we are planning a delegation in Thailand. Now, reason is Thailand, given the China dynamics and all those things, it's picking up with India. And they are valuing Indian companies. Last time I was there, and the kind of response we have received, it is quite fabulous. So we are taking a delegation. It could be a small one probably this time, just testing the water. Next, we are going to RSA again, not inside RSA, but on the sidelines of RSA conference in Nessa. We will be doing some activity. We are planning a delegation to UK. Then definitely the JISEC and the Black Hat, all those usual things. Bahrain, we are planning. Again, the narrative that I was sharing with a couple of you guys in terms of Bahrain. Bahrain is a very small geography. I'm just trying to create some thread so that you can think on different angles. Like Bahrain is a small market, $125 million market, right? Still, I'm focusing on that. At least twice or thrice I have been there taking some of the companies, a small delegation. Why I'm doing that? If we serve that market, like if we can build a narrative, say 3 years down the line, that Bahrain cybersecurity managed by India, like 80% of Bahrain security is managed by India. That's the narrative we can share in the Middle East. That's the brand we can create. I'm not saying 100%, 70%, 80%. If we can have that kind of a storyline. And sorry, that call is for the session is starting. So this is kind of a thing we are looking at. All those kind of elements, if you can look at, we'll be more than happy to explore this and do it. I have to rush now because that fireside chat I have to start. But again, I'll come back in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, Aditya and Pragya are here.
Yeah. The secretary will be here in the next couple of minutes. Just FYI. Hello. No, it's our turn is over. It's now your turn to speak.
So I think one thing which I feel is that, especially for
please.
Yeah, one thing I feel that especially like when you're doing the delegation events, like how do you attract not just the diaspora but other stakeholders? Because I think Vinayak shared a stat that if you look at all the CISOs, 3 to 4% like are of Indian origin, but 96% are still hopefully we'll have more just like CEOs are becoming Indo-American or Indians origin. Same thing will happen for CISOs, given that middle management is like more than 50%. So I think there has to be concerted effort that how do you create a very high quality event, which is not just limited to diaspora, because otherwise it's good to meet and hang out and get to know each other, But at the end of the day, every company needs business. You need solid leads, which would turn into a potential customer. So if you focus, just on the diaspora, you're basically leaving out the 96% of the market. So the bang on the buck doesn't go very far. So I think that's something from a feedback perspective.
No, absolutely. Very seen because when, again, coming from the Indo-US exchange, because I was part of that. So, just so happened that, of course, diaspora was the predominant factor, but we were also thrilled by the fact that there were also some, folks from there, the other side of the ecosystem as well. But you're right in terms of, we need to significantly enhance that now. But again, how do we actually go about it? Definitely it needs to be done. Maybe we need to think how do we operationalize that.
Yeah. I think one more point I would say, we have the other ecosystem. The way I feel it is a kind of sensitive topic, especially in the US. If you kind of call them out by name or whatnot. So I think from a just from a messaging perspective, if we can just avoid make the bigger line versus saying, hey, we are competing against someone, we just draw the bigger line. So I think that's one thing I felt, because I think I did attend the RSA event. I think somebody actually almost rose a slogan against that would be very, very sensitive, especially in this climate. So I think messaging has to be very crucial, that you control the messaging at any of the events, that we don't call out, just draw the bigger line.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi Aditya. So I'll bring back the point that I had said some months back in Mumbai during a similar DSCI event. So having a delegation that's going is great. It's a fantastic marketing thing. But to follow through, we need somebody on the ground to keep connections with the customer and then try to convert them. Because the more logos the Indian companies have, the more confidence that builds up in the industry, in the region, and that will help other companies who are coming in the next delegation, because there is a confidence that is building up, and that momentum will continue to grow. So one of the things that I was thinking, and maybe all of us are building a different components on cybersecurity, and all of us can create a stack. Helping each other is one of the things. I think we have talked about it so many times, but never actually implemented it. That is one thing. And the other thing is that maybe having a shared resource who can help us into reaching out into potential leads, and then we following it up. Because going to any place, even for that matter going to Dubai every month, may not be technically feasible, because we are still here in India and having a strong customer base out of India. So that can help if we have a shared resource. So that would be my 2 points.
Yeah, please. I'll just say one point.
Yeah, please.
I'll react to it this way, Anshu. One is that having an on-ground presence, that of course is a big commitment. But what may not be the way that you have explained, but we are trying to address it a little differently. For example, one is definitely the visits that happen during the conferences, which are already happening. But what about the visits, as you rightly pointed out, before that, after that, right? So we are making a concerted effort. Let's say if I'm talking about Dubai, so Dubai shouldn't just be about the JISEC visit. It should be, perhaps the other time of the year as well. So what we are doing is we are consciously picking 1 or 2 geographies where we go without any concerted event happening there, right? Outside of that event, so that we expand. Because when we are going just for meeting people, then we would be consciously, reaching out to more and more people, more CXOs, more user orgs, more buyers, etc. So we will try to build that community gradually. And then, as you mentioned, if these couple of visits, let's say, happen, although a couple is also sometimes, pushing it too far, because that may not be feasible for DSCI every time. But yes, this is how we are, thinking of addressing it.
You can have a DSCA chapter, say in Dubai, right?
True.
They may not be full time on it, but part of the chapter.
And we have been
And that can
contemplating.
be a form of base for us
Absolutely.
to take it forward.
We have been contemplating a Middle East chapter for some time. It's just that when it actually gets operationalized and executed remains to be seen. But yeah, we are on it. So that is definitely on our to-do list, that these international chapters, for example, when we were in US, we did announce the a US chapter of TSCI. But then those chapters should have some meaningful and substantial activities being driven, let's say, by folks around them, right? So yeah, we need to scale up on this piece. I agree.
Yeah, I will pick up this point again because I also have some thoughts. But before I say, add here, I just wanted to know how many startup founders are here, cybersecurity startup founders. One, two, three. No, no, not most of them actually. Only four. Me, five, four or five, right? Okay. So we have been a part of this DSCI, delegation at many places. We participated in GITEX, Protect.ai. Then we were at Black Hat. Okay, and we also wanted to go to RSA, but that could not materialize because of the visa issues. Yeah. So while we have been following up for the last 1.5 year, but if you ask me frankly, I mean, what is the kind of ultimate results what we are seeing? I mean, not that great at this point of time. Maybe we might have we also are just thinking that we are going there for branding purpose and all, and maybe we will be deploying our resources at a later date. Okay, I have many points to add here because of my kind of experience of participating in these events as well as from startup mindset. Okay, first thing is Atul just mentioned that while we take the delegation, okay, somebody raised that only 7 companies from India or maybe only 12 companies from India into the next one. We need to do an introspection. Why? We have 200 startups, right? So at the DSCI, we have to think of that why only 10 companies are coming. Okay, out of 200 or 250 incubated startups. That is one point. Okay, and I somehow felt that, okay, we wanted to be into RSA. We followed up with DSCI to get some visas and all for our team, but that didn't happen. So if we could not manage visa, how somebody can go and participate itself? And I myself followed for 3 months actually. That's all I know. Second, even companies, few of the startups who are ready to sponsor the cost, whatever is happening. What is the next set of results which we are getting? And I'm coming to his point that wherever we go, it's not a matter of going to 20 different countries. It may not be helpful, okay, but maybe focusing on some 10 different locations or 8 locations itself. Okay, where that delegation is going, we are able to focus. We went to Riyadh, we went to Dubai. Can we set up a small, channel there which can continuously collaborate? Now that there can be many different approaches. Even let's say 10 startups are going, they can sponsor some cost for 1%, 2%, can collectively, work for all these companies into that market. DSCI can sponsor something. I mean, there can be different level of thoughts which can happen. Especially what I believe is in US market will always be biggest market, right? North America relies so much on Israel market for cybersecurity needs. How can we create an ecosystem into these two geographies primarily? Okay, collaborate more. I always think that you have an incubation center here, right? Workplace and all. Why can't we do a similar kind of setup, a small setup for Indian startups in the US market? Okay. This is a serious, thought which I always believe that, okay, may work very well in terms of favoring Indian cybersecurity companies, take them to the US market or to Israel market, and then, even having a co-working space where people can come jointly do something, and that solves a lot of problem for being into the international, market, because not all of them are kind of, funded or have raised or maybe profitable. Still, many of them are bootstrapped, okay, from that perspective. So these 3-4 points, especially that we need to do an introspection. How can we make it successful? What are the learnings which we had from GITEX or from Black Hat and participating? How we can follow up? Okay, how we can go and do a kind of similar setup what we have done in Noida into some international geography. Okay, especially these 2 places what I mentioned. And then last point is, of course, a collective joint efforts to pursue wherever we go. These 3-4 things I feel that may be helpful for the community. Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. In fact, when Atul was speaking, I was just thinking if I am on the other side, in those participating countries looking at DSCI making inroads, I would definitely think make in India and made for the world. How much of the adoption is there in India? And today, we all know the Make in India is kind of definitely a proud thing, but the adoption is still low. And what are DSAI's thoughts and plans to actively promote, nurture the adoption, especially in the government sector. And added to that, one sees a lot of this government RFPs being heavily influenced by a lot of these consulting companies where they put, they call it bells and whistles in the industry. 80% of the bells and whistles are not really used, but they make it so draconian that the Make in India ecosystem cannot really be compliant to all the features and functions. I think DSAI should also perhaps consider influencing the government sector as well, like NTRO and other bodies. And I would like to hear some thoughts on, adoption.
We will be hearing, as a matter of fact, because this setup is for the international market, how we are going into.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I'm just saying that tomorrow we are talking precisely what we are, doing from a government standpoint, enablement standpoint, policy standpoint, it's a procurement standpoint. So all these aspects we are going to be discussing tomorrow. So I'm just, trying to,
I just wanted to add
point
that
well
because
received, point well received.
it two sides of the same coin. When you're going and promoting in Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, the guys on the other side is going to ask, what is your adoption in your own home country? And that's like stinging us,
They
saying,
go hand in hand.
yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I haven't gone in any of the delegations, right? But I have I don't know, it's an idea that I have. I have been thinking of this for some time. And it's a thing that Atul was mentioning. In India, we have a lot of companies, right? So I'll give an example of Israel before, right? Why is Israel so famous on security? Because of the Tel Aviv University, right? Tel Aviv has a cybersecurity focused department. It started getting the attention when the research papers started coming from the Tel Aviv University. If you look at this year Black Hat, MENA, there were around 30% of the call for tools were from India. Okay. In DSCI, supposedly 5 to 6 companies are going, but these people who are going and presenting the tools there are from India itself. They might not be going with DSCI, but they are going from India. If there is a possibility, if you can take those names along with you, it would give a bigger exposure of India as a brand, as we were mentioning, right? So, I can tell you, this year there were 3 tools from our end which was being presented. And the reason why we would prefer that route is because we don't have a cost there. Because they select the tool, they sponsor everything. So, but it's going from India, and if DSCI can capitalize on that, it would be helpful for DSCI is what I wanted to mention. That's how the Tel Aviv or the Israel thing also works in. Because if there is 250 companies, even a delegation won't be taking 250 companies. Right. So, but if we can tag along with this, it can be helpful.
Yeah, fine. But we did something of that.
Yes, ambassador visits. I would like to mention about the ambassador visits. So we make sure that ambassador is visiting all the Indian companies
And not
who
just
are
the
present
pavilion.
in the
Not
yes,
just the pavilion.
not just the pavilion. For example, our call managing in Jaipur, Mini Orange for that matter.
Several other companies
Yes.
were there. So what she's trying to say is that we had 13 companies in this time around, and Indian pavilion and Saudi. No, that's
Yeah. So, what I'm talking about is not the companies, right? These companies are going. Many companies are going as a sponsor itself.
right.
But if you look at specific, as an event like Black Hat or DEF CON, it is famous because of the call for tools or the arsenals, right? Black Hat arsenals.
Right.
So if 30% of the arsenals are coming from India, they won't come under a brand or a company or something, but they would come as something which is coming from India. So that is something that we can tag along as.
What is the question? The question is very simple. Did you just join? Okay. So the question is very simple that the GTD team of DSCI has been working for past 1 year officially, taking some delegations, setting some pavilions, driving some engagements on ground in various different parts of the world, right? And companies are looking at different markets. They're trying to make inroads, and they're trying to establish, set presence and various different engagements that they're trying to make. So we are seeking inputs as to
I have
how.
one input. So I was in, by the way, I was in Black Hat, right? So I was just with Pragya,
Yeah.
and 13 companies, one of the companies.
Perfect.
So one thing that can happen is we can, when we say India Pavilion, then that thought of going there together should start. Maybe let's say Black Hat is next year, we should start scouting for companies this year. And then when somebody says India Pavilion, then shouldn't it reflect the best in India for anything and everything that goes? So there should be a lot more restrictions for anyone to be there, plus a lot more training, because generally people on the stalls who are presenting India, when we are tagging India to this, then there has to be the global standard, right? It should not be that anybody's allowed. If so if we start a year early, put out a wait list, put out specification of companies, like it's not like anybody's allowed, right? Okay, because in cyber in India we have 100 odd companies in MDR, like Darshan is here now. Hi Darshan. So we can say, hey, CISA is here, right? For PCI, they're the best. Then Saru can be there for privacy. We're the best. But I'm just saying. But everybody's not the best. So when everybody's not the best, then the same problem goes back. That what he was also mentioning, that there are 30% Indian companies, but we just lost. Yeah.
Thanks. One follow-up point that I just wanted to add, I think as part of the US delegation, it was phenomenal work. I mean, thanks to you and the SCI, I think it just opened up, especially the visit to the NIST, and that's something that was really remarkable. I think one of the key things that I just want to add to whatever people have been saying is that if you can focus on a few countries, because focus precedes success. So if you can focus on the US and probably Middle East, that will also help us, because ASA is limited resources, we are limited on resources. So we have to figure out which are the best places if we conquer in the next 2 years or 3 years as an Indian ecosystem, where we'll get the maximum ROI for business for all our companies. I think that will give us a lot, rather than spreading too thin, instead of Australia, ASEAN and all that. Is my 2 cents, is because we've done a phenomenal effort in going to the US, spent a lot of time, resources, as well as in the Middle East. If you just follow up on that for the next couple of things and have more, like the way you said, more follow through before the event, after the event, I think we will all start seeing ROI, because as we all know, we don't get ROI for the first visit itself. We have to follow through it in a number of times. We have to have trust in the ecosystem, that we are serious people, as rightly said, that we have to build brand, and brand, especially in the US market, it's all about brand building. And we are, as a company, let's understand that India, we are starting late, so we have to build our trust in the ecosystem, that we exist and we are serious people, whom they can trust. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. Any other point? Yes.
Hi. I believe most of us have probably spoken in different bits and pieces, right? As Anshul rightly mentioned, right? Everybody who's there at an event, be it international or domestic, right? It's all about business. A few call for actions as part of research, probably, for example, when a delegation goes to everybody might not have been fortunate to be to US before that, wherein so they know the know-how of the country and how the business is done. I have seen people struggling to figure out how a region actually operates, right? If you talk about Middle East or the UAE market, right? It's more distribution or a partner-driven market, right? Technically, OEMs or services provider will have to run through a business model which operates there. I have seen people struggling because they don't know how business. So the first 2 visits are just a lot of travel, but no output. If that sort of research, because you probably have done it with DSCI, 1 year of experience, right? And I'm sure there can be cues taken from other SIAs or vendors who are doing it, like Help AG, or pick up any big distributor in Middle East, right? Those kind of pointers becomes a queue for the investing companies or people who want to be a part of delegation. So maybe some sort of research helps their GTM as well, and that's indirectly doing business in the region. So maybe if that kind of research can be made available, while all the other pointers are going to be equally relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. You want to say?
Yes. Yeah. So, couple of things, and you could correct me if my understanding is correct. That three overall roles that I understand that DSAI has when we represent companies in international market. So, first is representation India's representation. The second is engagement with the various stakeholders, including the diplomatic stakeholders. And third is conversion, which is more in the benefit of the industry, right? So these three. So considering these, if, along with the industry, we could have some key KRAs which are defined for the year. Because today I think representation takes a lot of effort, which you are already doing. Engagement, like Atul mentioned, there is sometimes engagement with the diplomats and sometimes not. Conversion, I think, is not your key, I would say, charter point. But if that also, along with the industry, if that could also be made a key KRA, so that at the end of, let's say, a period, 6 months, 1 year, we have defined outcomes for all of these. Then what happens is, then it is mutual encouragement. DSCI is doing the facade, the marketing part, along with the representation, and industry is gaining through these conversions. Yeah, so then I think it will be a symbiosis. Today, I think what is happening, and again, you can correct me if I am wrong, is that DSI is doing a wonderful job in terms of taking the whole delegation, right? But conversion is the responsibility of the individual players, which is also right. But I would say that how do we enhance this further, right? When this collaboration happens, then the symbiosis will yield these results. So this is one. Second, I think I would agree with many of my colleagues here, where I think it's very essential that we plan the before, during, after any event, and that should be mapped to these KRAs. So before, like culture, knowing the culture of where we are going, giving the right kind of orientation, if not training, just so that everybody is on the same page. And if possible, I think if a small group, which is again a combination of industry and DSCI, could again be the front end. While individual companies can represent their, the USPs, but the initial, I think, the representation has to be or can be from DSCI, because then it will be consistent, because that is how we are marketing India, right? And again, the effort in terms of preparation can come in both from DSCI and industry. Then during the conference or during the event, I think the efforts in terms of really showcasing India as a powerhouse in cybersecurity can be done, will be more, I think, accepted by international players if it comes from somebody like DSCI. Because if I or Darshan or others, we do that marketing bit, there is obviously a commercial angle. But when DSCI does it, one is the international bodies will have more confidence, because you are like a combination of industry, government, etc. Right? The after, I think, of the event should be a debrief session where we look at all the KRAs, both the representation, engagement, conversions, and whether we met them or not. If we didn't, how do we meet them going ahead? Because then there is a structure to this whole effort. Otherwise, what happens is both as in capacity of a business or in capacity of an industry delegation, lot of effort goes, but it somewhere dissipates over a period of time. If business comes, fine. If it doesn't, then it's just a marketing value add that we get. Now, a couple of other things which I thought would be relevant is when we say trade, right? And every embassy has a commercial directorate or somebody handling. So there would be bilateral agreements between countries which as industries we may not be aware. So if that can be used to promote business and take commitment of a certain size of revenue. I do not know how that will happen, but like you said, I'm just throwing ideas which may help, so that that commitment can be then passed on to the industry. Another thing I would say is, see, every company is at a different stage. So while our colleague here mentioned that we should have the best, I have a different view in that we need to support the entire industry. Because best is a very relative, subjective term. Somebody is just starting off; they may not have the liberty of good funds or even technical resources, but then they are still part of the industry. So I think that way DSCI can be the central moderating authority who can then distribute this kind of potential revenue across organizations. And how do we increase the economy of a country? Not by just focusing on the best. We have to just spread across everybody, right? Because finally it translates into employment of citizens of India, which I think is the primary responsibility of all of us here, who've started companies. Yeah, I think this session is I think a very well thought of, because you see we seldom get the opportunities where we have these closed room sessions where we could ideate. So I think taking this forward, if we could have a focus session where we could all sit and have a foresight on what do we want the next year to look like, right? In terms of all of these three areas that I said: representation, engagement, and conversions. And then plan for it. And have a loosely documented framework. We don't need to have, high-flying processes, etc. But a loose, and then it grows. We start somewhere which is shabby, but at least we start somewhere. And then build over it. And I think 4 people from DSCI and 40 people from the industry will have enough brains to actually make this a success. So I know I spoke a lot, but this is, thank you.
Sorry, sir, can we go and then maybe come to you?
No, thanks for the session. So, sometime back in Bangalore, there is some engagement between Australia and India. There is some pavilion that we set up. So I was not aware about it, but then it was a good overall. But post that, we had some interactions with a couple of partners in that region. Suddenly they recollected, okay, there was something happened. So India, Australia, okay, there is something tie-up, it's happening, some engagements are happening. But unfortunately, we couldn't, as a team, we couldn't able to follow up continuously because we didn't have that bandwidth at that point of time. As he said, the partner and the ecosystem. So each country might be on the sales side. So I'm more on the sales or strategic side. So mostly looking at the revenue side. So the business needs to run. Now, in Indian ecosystem, if you look at, if we have, say, 2 large banks backed, if you have 2 large regulatories backed, then it's a continuous automated business. So people will come, people will listen to us, people will, the sales will close, it will flow. But when you look at the Middle East market, as he said, it would be a partner driven. How we can invite those partners, and when we or the startups or the ecosystem can pitch our solutions, let them decide if they wish to go with us or not. And let them select at least 1 or 2 out of it. Then that we can make it as a commitment, because you are inviting them for a session, and if you could give a commitment that, okay, we will align with 2 minimum OEMs out of this pitch that they are putting it across. So this we could do in Dubai market. So in other verticals, say how this US giants or these companies doing, they are touching the regulatories first. So if it is US, okay, you need to cut down the cost for some of 1 or 2 accounts and buy the account, because now we are seeing somewhere around 5,000 to 5 crore size worth single deals. Say I might be selling my product at 1 unit at 5,000. There might be a startup which is selling at 5 crore also. So how we can, so both these we cannot combine together. So both set or different set of partners will be there. If we could able to align the partner ecosystem and the strategic accounts in selected regions, then that will be a good thing for revenue generation. Thank you.
So I think one thing which the other ecosystem is doing really well is delegations. So basically, like, they have it's run by the embassy both on the East Coast and the West Coast. And what they do is basically, they will get 20-25 CISOs together. The CISOs will pay for their own travel, but the rest of it is all taken care of, like site visits and whatnot. So you literally have like 20 CISOs kind of captive. The other feedback I would say for, like, even for this conference, which is like, how do you get more speakers, which are like CISOs or practitioners outside India, and like maybe some from Middle East, some from US. I think because there's a conference called Cybertech, and they have really done it like a masterful job at grabbing CISOs from Europe, from US, and they come and they see and they get acclimated with the system. They're doing a lot of like after conference activities. So it brings that familiarity that, hey, I know you, so I'm ready to do business with you. So something similar, which is like, hey, 3-day conference, and the rest 4 days, maybe with help with the companies, you organize like a visit to Jaipur or something. So I think that would work really well, which is like more international speakers, 3-day conference, 4-day, a little bit of like cultural. So they like start trusting these people and like, hey, I'm ready to do business with you.
So a couple of things I think we discussed during the insect when we did in Mumbai actually was that by taking their brains, both in terms of the geographies which we should prioritize, both other in terms of activating the partner network, then what are those key platforms and events that we should be missing from an international perspective. But I think now when we come back to you in terms of a form or something, in order to grab your profile, one form might become a little longer, to accommodate all that we have said today. Of course, we need to prioritize, let's be realistic in terms of, being able to, it's okay. Being able to implement some of them to begin with. Not all ideas we would be able to implement from the word go, but I think, we have done 3 major milestones in 2023. We have learned our lessons for sure. Maybe what, Saru was saying that, scouting early for the companies. Then sensitizing the companies about that market very in advance so that they go a little prepared. So let's say if it is 2 visits that take to get familiarized, can we cut it down to 1? Because it's not going to be 0 for sure, because you need some time to develop that familiarity, right? So all this we'll put in the form of some documentation for sure. So Pragya will be in touch with all of you, because we know who all were there in the room, because we have those records. And then when we are floating that particular form, it would be to the larger industry, not just people in the room, because there are so many of you who were part of Dubai, US, and some were common across. But I think in terms of how do we break that nut of the ROI piece, the ROI, where DSCI can play a role. I think that we need to debate a little more internally, because let's say we are focusing on brand India. So we always make sure that whenever we are there, it's not just the companies that are getting showcased. We are getting at least some time on those international platforms where we talk about Indian perspective, not the DSA, not the Indian, not the companies, but overall what India has to offer from cyber standpoint. We are making sure that we are making those speeches. We are getting that time on those international stages, because if you're not visible, how people are going to come to know, right? So we will get back to you, with that form. Please, my only humble request is, I know that people are responding and they have their busy schedules, but try and be a little more connected with us, with the GTD team person. That is my humble request to all of you, because then we would be able to drive a lot more. Because at the end of the day, we can't really make it happen all by ourselves. So let's be very clear on that, and I'll be not mincing my words here. We need the support if the industry is looking for that kind of support from DSA. Has to be a two-way route. Just my humble request. So thank you so much, because I think we have just hit the time. I don't want to exceed and cut into the gunshot. But yeah, let's continue to enjoy the AISS. Thank you. Thank you. you.